Well, good morning, good morning and good afternoon and good evening across the world. And we cannot thank you enough for joining us today. And we have a very full session here today to really take us through the Only Metrics campaign and some of the incredible work taking place across the world. And so first, I also want to acknowledge our partners in this work, Social Economy Europe, represented by Paula Diego, who's the Policy and Projects Lead for Social Economy Europe, and the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, represented by Il-Chang Yi, who's the Senior Research Coordinator, leading alternative economics for transformation. And additionally, I must thank Michael Peck, the co-founder of One Worker, One Vote, and ASBN board member, for his tireless efforts to organize this important forum, and more importantly, for his incredible vision and work to help us realize the opportunity for global partnerships to usher in a more just and sustainable economy. For those not familiar with the American Sustainable Business Network, we're building a business movement across the United States, partnering with business organizations, companies, investors, social enterprises, and others, collectively representing more than 250,000 that advocate for solutions and policies that support a more just, sustainable stakeholder economy. Our mission is to educate, connect, and mobilize business leaders and investors to transform the public and private sectors in the overall economy. At ASBN, we have certainly understood that this work needs to occur globally, and that in our model, we recognize that it is best served by building partnerships with the leading organizations, providing that leadership within their communities and their countries. So we're so appreciative of the incredible collaboration that we've been building with Social Economy Europe. And, together, I think we see the opportunity for a social global economy partnership. And, in this new partnership with the UNRISD, the Sustainable Development Performance Indicators, and the Own the Metrics campaign is an important piece of the work. Also, in helping us to build these partnerships, I want to acknowledge the role of Iban Zugasti and Mondragon, who helped us to realize the historic Social Economy Europe and ASBN formal collaboration in 2020 on the 5th anniversary of the Paris Accords. This work, in its new form in the Own the Metrics efforts, is work that we brought to the World Cooperative Congress in Seoul, and, and also to the Social Economy Summit in Strasbourg in May 2022. And ASBN was the sole US participant invited to the November Sustainable Development Performance Indicators launched, backed by Social Economy Europe and ASBN. And, this is so important to us and the new allies that we're bringing in, including the pre-distribution initiative. And today, we have also worked to bring attention to Social Economy Ukraine when it came into being, and where we seek and hope a brighter future for Ukraine itself, as led by the social economy movement there as well. And we've also begun to draw attention to social economy African leaders as well. For ASBN, corporate transparency and environmental and social and governance disclosure has been an important issue for quite a number of years. We've held a national working group bringing together many of the policy and practice leaders across the country. For us, we've identified, our leaders have, a number of key areas of focus: higher levels of transparency across all financial disclosure and reporting, inclusive metrics for evaluating real financial risk, which include systemic ESG considerations, transparency and equity in insurers' coverage and investments, as risk is primarily managed currently through the insurance industry, and progressive tax incentives, which encourage transparent and equitable corporate governance, as well as just overall support for a just and equitable transition in the US. listen, given the recent anti-ESG attacks being mounted, by the status quo, short-term profit at all costs, extractive industries, and the trade associations that represent them, these attacks at the state level and the national level have only, strengthened our resolve to really build out this work going forward. So, we cannot thank you enough, for this work, all of you, and are so excited about continuing on today. So it's now my pleasure to pass it on to Paula Di Diego, as I said, the Policy and Projects Lead for Social Economy Europe. Paula?
Yeah, thank you so much, David. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak at this webinar. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So here it is. I can go to something. Yeah. So can you see my screen? Perfect. So we are Social Economy Europe, and we represent 2.8 million social economy enterprises and organizations across Europe, being the reference point for the social economy at the European level. Currently, we have 23 members, including national umbrella organizations and European networks. And our purpose is to contribute to a diverse economy at the service of people and planet. So to do that, we have a permanent dialogue with the European institutions, and we are the Secretariat of the European Parliament Social Economy Intergroup, members of the European Commission Expert Group on Social Economy and Social Enterprises, the co-leaders of the Social Economy and Proximity Skills Partnership, members of the EU Industrial Forum, the European Platform to Combat Homelessness, and also the Youth Entrepreneurship Policy Academy. In December 2020, we signed a partnership with the American Sustainable Business Council and started our collaboration together with the objectives of sharing best public policies, elevating sustainable businesses and the social economy, and creating a permanent global dialogue, amongst others. Within this collaboration, we have organized different workshops and events, making joint communications, and of course, support together the Own the Metrics campaign. Social Economy Europe is totally aware of the necessity of a good impact assessment of the ESG. Currently, the European policies on social economy are guided by the Social Economy Action Plan, which is totally aligned also with the ESG and the SDGs, and with the necessity of a proper measurement of data and a better recognition of social economy and social impact. In fact, one of the three main areas of the Social Economy Action Plan is the recognition and awareness raising, and the European Commission has the commitment of supporting the development of social impact measurement and management. We supported and welcomed the Sustainable Development Performance Indicators Manual and launched the On the Metrics, a global social and solidarity economic campaign with SEE-ASBN and the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development. The manual highlights workers' ownership of enterprise with democratic control, which is totally aligned with the values and principles of social economy. This stakeholder empowerment message of workplace equity and democratic governance is central to the Social Economy Europe mission as one of the values of social economy. Moreover, Social Economy Europe is observer of the UN Task Force on Social Economy and Solidarity, and has supported the process for the creation of the recently launched UN resolution promoting the social and solidarity economy for sustainable development, which paves the way for a new social solidarity economy approach to the ESG and SDGs without greenwashing or virtual signaling. The On the Metrics campaign is about making sure those social economy innovators and practitioners doing and providing the work own a proportionally equal seat at the global ESG, SDGs, rulemaking and standard setting tables, and participate fully, freely, and productively in ESG, SDGs, human and social capital asset allocations that appeal all. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to pass the floor to Ichleon Ji.
As introduced, I'm Il Chung-Yi, Senior Research Coordinator at UNRISD. It is such a pleasure to be with you all, and thank you very much for having me here. United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, or UNRISD, is an autonomous research institute within the UN system, and it was established 60 years ago in 1963. So this year is our 60th anniversary. So happy birthday to us. So the Secretary General in 1963 granted UNRISD an autonomous status within the United Nations system to ensure it could freely conduct critical research, and critical research even on very much politically sensitive issues. And since then, it has been always questioning conventional wisdoms and suggesting innovative solutions to complicated developmental issues. In UNRISD, I am leading the program of Alternative Economies for Transformation. I think today's webinar is very much aligned with the very purpose of our program, Alternative Economies for Transformation, because we are all searching for alternatives for transformation. All the panelists of today's webinar are on the same page in terms of our destination or purpose, which is to move beyond methodology and indicators preventing our well-being, planet health, and democracy in all aspects of life from realization. I think three panelists in the first panel, Yvonne Jugasti of Mondragon Group, Yu-Kyung Choi, Korea Legislation Research Institute, and Michael Pack, ASBN and Own the Metrics campaign, will give us their thoughts on how and why we get together under the flag of Own the Metrics campaign. So over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you very much, Il-Chun. I hope you can hear me. I'm in an airport, and sometimes the Wi-Fi internet connection is not working properly. So it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you. Let me say, first of all, that on behalf of Mondragon Corporation, I would like to thank, of course, UNRISD, Il-Chun, and the whole team, Social Economy Europe, Paula and the whole team also in Social Economy Europe, and American Sustainable Business Network, David Levine, and of course my colleague and friend Michael Peck for making this webinar happen. Mondragon has participated in the development of the UNRISD SDPI Manual and tool through two large worker-owned cooperatives, Fagor Ederland and Laboral Kucha, who took part in the piloting process, and Mondragon University through the Lanke Institute as a research partner in the international benchmarking process. Mondragon is currently active in several international initiatives to improve the way business performance is measured and reported. Let me give you an example. The team I lead in Mondragon's Foresight Institute Prospectica is a partner in the Erasmus Plus research project Secure, Smart Education for Corporate Sustainability Reporting. The starting point of this project is that tracking data and environmental and social aspects are providing this information to external and internal stakeholders is an integral part of sustainability reporting. Pressures of the regulatory framework, value chains and financial sectors are leading to the situation where the preparation and publication of sustainability reports by companies is no longer just an optional promotional matter, but becomes an important element of overall business success. The European Green Deal is accompanied by a series of legislation, initiatives, and approaches. Collectively, these regulations and directives aim to increase transparency and accountability on corporate social reporting, ESG issues, and encourage companies to improve their sustainability practices. Companies subject to these obligations must ensure that they comply with the relevant reporting requirements and disclose accurate and relevant information. For example, the recently adopted Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive requires around 50,000 of the largest companies in the EU to disclose data on the impact of their activities on people and the planet, as well as on sustainability risks they are exposed to. The new CSRD obligations expand the range of approaches that sustainability managers need to cover, which the Secure project aims to help with. The project was launched in May 2022 with support from the European Erasmus Plus program and will run for 2 years. It brings together 5 partners from business and academia from 5 different EU member states, including the Czech Republic, Poland, Romania, Slovenia, and Spain. The Secure project aims to develop a vocational education and training course and a corresponding professional skill competence profile in line with the EC-DET, which will enable professionals in private and or public organizations, as well as VET teachers, to become certified secure managers. The main topic of the course will be sustainability management and sustainability reporting, with a particular focus on ESG data, SDGs, and CSRD reporting. The project includes the development of a knowledge repository, event course, and an e-learning platform. The course will be offered as a free educational resource available in English, Czech, Polish, Romanian, Slovenian, and Spanish. Finally, let me tell you that Mondragon is and will continue contributing to this successful On the Metrics campaign, jointly with UNRISD, Social Economy Europe, and American Sustainable Business Network, with the aim of reducing international corporate greenwashing activities and improve business performance measurement and reporting practices and tools for a more sustainable and fairer future. So once again, count on us for this continuous endeavor. Thank you, and back to the panel.
So thank you so much, Iban. It's true. We live in a world of very bad metrics, what the shareholder primacy capitalists like to call externalities, which is their assumptions that validate plantation economy vicious cycle conclusions. Here are 3 recent examples. First, the Financial Times has informed us that a quote, "a fifth of the metrics used within SASB standards are not internationally applicable," according to the International Sustainability Standards Board, which has now launched a consultation on reforms to the Sustainability Accounting Standard Board standards with the aim of making those easier to apply across jurisdictions. This is the war of the accounting standards acronyms world, SASB versus ISSB. Only the elites know what this means. My response is, better yet, SASB and ISSB, you need to become SDPI practitioners and advocates and join the rising global social solidarity economy urgently. Second, The Guardian reports this morning that research by Corporate Accountability, a nonprofit transnational corporate watchdog, found that 93% of the offsets Chevron reported after their $35.5 billion in profits last year as the #2 fossil fuel company in the US were, quote, too environmentally problematic to be classified as anything other than worthless or junk. Worthless junk. Third, the Financial Times also proclaimed last week that AI is the new ESG. Hard to choose where to begin with this one. AI is the new ESG, but let's start with invalidating this Wizard of Oz investor enthusiasm for the next new thing passing for economic wisdom. It's already clear the planet can no longer afford the luxury of tin people missing their essential hearts. Opportunistic scarecrows, depending on the brains of others, and cowardly lions unable to face the loss of personal freedoms from shrinking climate resiliency. Too often unwilling and able to fight back with better tools. So let's change out these bad metrics for good ones. Universal Sustainable Development Performance Indicators, SDPIs, through our Own the Metrics campaign, reinserts the solidarity social economy heartbeat back into the waiting, hoping world searching for truth before extinction. SDPI benchmarking tools will inspire capital allocations to redesign and rebuild a planetary, respectful civic society that is solidarity infused, a metaphorical yellow brick road that works for all. Someone in the tech world can market this as Oz Plus with a rainbow check mark. So what's new, exciting, and demanding? Social impact investing equates and juxtaposes four ESG capital sources: human, social, environmental, and financial. Without being overly dramatic, this is a humanity first, the first ever in our human history. People brush over such inclusion, but I consider this juxtaposition a miracle because it puts the global social economy de facto inside the shareholder primacy capitalism room for the first time, with human and social capital treated as assets and not someone else's disposable commodities. Every labor organizer knows that the first fight is to get inside the room. This is about grabbing onto toeholds and fingerholds to scale mountains of embedded socioeconomic inequalities and injustices everywhere. Financial capital succumbed a long time ago to plantation shareholder primacy economics and produces a world of hurt. Environmental or natural capital is fighting for our planetary life with businesses and governments unable and too often unwilling to match walk to talk. For human and social capital providers, the S for social in ESG's environmental social governance formulations is based on resiliency algorithms. Resiliency demands stakeholder ownership and democratic governance to prevail. They are inseparable. One provides the roots and rationale for the other. Profit motive is uplifted beyond individual to community, beyond naked self-interest to enlightened societal interest. Better metrics support higher purpose-driven values and compatible operating structures. They create sequential downstream virtuous cycles that are aspirational and inspire others. Leading worker cooperative ecosystems like Mondragon in Spain's Basque region, Quebec in Canada, and Italy's Emilia-Romagna show that profitability allows us to afford our own values. Our Own the Metric campaign, call to action, intends to deploy SDPI metrics so that instead of nothing about us, without us is for us, we move the global ESG SDG metrics conversation to everything cooperatively about us, with us, is for all of us. Hector McGee in The Sum of Us calls this the solidarity dividend, and its power is both synergistically global and local so that the whole becomes upwardly transformative and impactful than the sum of the parts. Owning our SDPI metrics can build better and fairer macroeconomics for the many. Already, metrics confirm that companies operating from long-term, purpose-driven stakeholder primacy models are outperforming those who don't. Metrics show broad-based worker-owned social enterprises and ecosystems, including worker cooperatives, aligned by high road principles and practices, are more stable, inclusive, equitable, democratic, resilient, and competitive, with fewer job losses, especially during downturns. Research reveals that combining an equity stake with high participatory democratic ownership culture, essentially the definition of a worker cooperative, creates upwardly transformative shared purpose-driven businesses and societies. If pandemics economies teach us anything, it is that the world's most exposed precariat populations are the most essential to our common survival. Treating others as we would treat ourselves is not just good business, it's also morally honest. So I'm going to conclude by saying shared prosperity is no miracle. It can be ESG funded and SDPI measured, social economy replicated, and multiplied through innumerable centrifugal and centripetal ecosystems interlocking global supply chain virtuous cycles in fair trade constructs. It can be the sixfold bottom line: people, planet, purpose, profit, participation, and prosperity. So with that, I'd like to close and give the panel over to Yu Kyung.
Hi, I'm so sorry. It's very nice to see you all. I'm Yu Kyung Chair at the Korea Legislation Research Institute in South Korea. And the reason that I am invited to hear this wonderful group is that I guess because I have been working on social value and social economy legislative in perspective of a legislative dimension, working for the government of South Korea. So nowadays it's even enriches to the SDG and ESG agenda as well. So that's why I guess Michael and all other great colleagues honorably invite me to this group. So let me introduce very shortly about the Korean situation here. Honestly, my background is not basically in this social economy group, but since 2017 to 18, the then government of Korea was really into the social economy and social value implementation in Korea. So I've been working for the government to make this legislation for 5 years. So in the meantime, I realized that there were a lot of legislation before in Korea to establish the social economy ecosystem. So it could be a little bit different from other nations, even though we actually borrowed a lot of system from Spain or Italy, not to mention the other European countries. So in a way, it is very interesting. I think field work here to see how it worked in Korea, different from other European countries. But unfortunately, as the government, the administration has been changed by the president, another president now. The current one is not that much interested in social economy or social value anymore, but interestingly, the private sector as a whole is more into ESG or SDGs. So as an observer and as a researcher, I think it was really interesting kind of momentum to be transformed from the government perspective to private sector perspective, how it actually is working in Korea. So we are in the kind of middle of process of all of these legislation. And we are, in the meantime, we luckily got a chance to contact to an UNRISD with Dr. Il Chung Lee, and we discovered that they have been working on the social sustainable development performance index project. So we also already introduced that index in Korea, and then we are now working on how it will be working in Korea. Besides the ESG kind of global disclosure norm setting. So I cannot tell how it will be implemented in Korea or dimension, but I hope we can at least partially contribute to this great network in a way, because we have a lot of good data and kind of legislative histories and all other practitioners and specialists in this area. So yeah, I mean, if you have any further question or comments, I would be very happy to share my idea or experience all the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yu-kyung. We're so glad that you made it to the panel today. Really, really pleased. Yu-chung, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. UNRISD started its research on corporate governance and CSR from the 90s, and it started paying attention to ESG issues from the early 2000s. And as ESG measurement methodologies and indicators developed, UNRISD's research team started to have kind of several questions about ESG measurement itself or its methodologies. So the questions were, can current indicators measure sustainability, or can current indicators provide stakeholders with information on sustainability of economic entities, or can current indicators help to increase sustainability of companies or cooperatives or other economic entities, and so on. And our answers to those questions were very much negative. And so because of those negative answers, we launched a new project titled Sustainable Development Performance Indicator. So the project aimed to assess and improve methodologies and indicator systems that measure and evaluate the performance of broad range of economic entities in terms of the achievement of the SDGs and realization of SDGs business. So therefore, through the SDPI project, we wanted to develop methodologies and indicators that have unique characteristics or features. Those unique features or characteristics, firstly, we wanted to develop indicators which can be applied to not only for-profit enterprises, but also social and solidarity economy or SSE organizations, which are considered a significant player in achieving multiple SDGs. And secondly, we believe that transformative vision of the SDGs can only be realized when we can address the structural features of unsustainable development, absolute emission reduction in global value chains, or gender and income inequality within corporate structure, labor rights, corporate taxation, and corporate political influences are among those key elements needing to be addressed. But current ESG indicators often treat these issues very superficially or ignore them outright. Therefore, SDPI methodologies and indicators have been designed to measure the actual contribution of economic entities to transformation by focusing on these issues. For instance, SDPI methodologies and indicators have been designed to measure the performance on structure and the underpinnings of unsustainable and exclusionary behavior of economic entities, such as inequality and imbalances in power relations and governance systems. Gender-related indicators and wage-related indicators have been particularly elaborated in this context through the indicators of SDPI. Thirdly, the SDPI indicator adopted a context-based approach that measures performance against a sustainable norm or sustainability threshold. So based on this context-based approach, we developed various indicators called context-based indicators. Fourthly, the SDPI highlighted the fact that it is impossible to assess progress unless we know the trajectory of change. The annual or biannual data snapshots that are often used by mainstream sustainability reporting are not helpful at all. Time series data of 5 years or 10 years are needed to assess performances of issue areas such as carbon emission reduction, collective bargaining coverage, and employment status. So the SDPI adopted the trend analysis of at least 5 years. And after 4 years of research, finally, after 4 years of research, we could we could think that we were successful in avoiding the flaws of the averages by demanding more granular data that can reveal significant variations in geographical performance or within the employment structure by bringing in the kind of a granular approach. So every indicators should have very much detailed kind of data sets and information along the line of job categories or occupational statuses and So we were successful in avoiding the flaws of the average, or something called the mystery of averages in social science statistics. And after 4 years of research and pilot tests to realize these features or unique characteristics, UNRISD could develop SDPIs composed of 2 tiers and 61 indicators. Among these, 20 indicators are based on the core indicators developed by UNCTAD, which are those indicators necessary to be qualified as a sustainability report within the context of SDGs reporting. And 41 indicators are the ones newly developed by our research team. And those 41 indicators have kind of 2 groups of indicators. First one is 35 indicators, which can be used by both for-profit and social and solidarity economy entities, and 6 indicators were designed specifically for SSE entities only. So with that, I will pass the floor to Sonia, who will talk about the implication of these indicators for the SSE entities, and then Jan, my colleague, will talk about our SDPI online platform. So over to you, Sonia.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to present the social solidarity economy perspective in the creation of the SDPI indicators. The question we ask ourselves is what this alternative form of organizing the economy can bring to the table in how organizations in SSE look at sustainability. The conclusion is that what needs to be measured has to demonstrate unsustainable practices, and it has to contribute to transforming the system, addressing the root causes of unsustainability. Social solidarity economy organizations address structural issues. They do address regulatory blind spots often, not always. They promote human dignity, and they promote ethical business practices. The difference is that it's not just what enterprises produce, their outputs and outcomes, but how they do it, inputs and processes, that matters in understanding this difference. It's about relations in production and consumption, reciprocity and trust that dominates these relationships. I use cooperatives as the benchmark model because they have well-defined values and principles. They have a statement on the cooperative identity. The statement basically indicates that they cater to community needs rather than investments. And there is a global network represented by the International Cooperative Alliance. Sustainability indicators from a perspective of cooperatives and broader SSE need to expose structural causes of the dominant unsustainable economic model and regulatory environment. They need to expose unethical practices that are driven by the strive for profit and growth. They need to show the effects that these alternative business models have in various spheres of economic activity, reveal the transformative potential of SSE to give them more presence in the mainstream, and to nudge those among them who actually succumb to isomorphic pressures and are veering away from their purpose. So there are many large cooperatives who actually are not looking like cooperatives any longer. And in measuring certain indicators or certain aspects of their organizing, they may actually be able to switch and shift back towards their roots. The difference of the SSE is in their purpose. They're usually there to mitigate social and economic injustice by means of collective action. They internalize the externalities by including the stakeholders, and address structural issues such as unequal income distribution, the dominant role of capital, the global production, consumption, and services, long supply chains, and commodification. Sustainability from this perspective is about the distribution of power and income to labor and other stakeholders in the process. The subordinate role of capital, with cooperatives, especially worker cooperatives, and Mondragon complex comes to mind, actually state that in their principles, that capital is an instrumental input, but has a secondary role to labor. Competitive pressure, mitigating market power. It means promoting human dignity, impacting workers, consumers, producers, and the broader community. Decommodification of necessities and of land, labor, and money. That's Polanyi's concept. And longevity, serving future generations, right? Enterprise is not a commodity, and it's not exposed to capital market speculations. Last but not least, growth by networks and spin-offs, and not by amassing capital necessarily. The Sustainable Development Performance Indicators, SDPIs, as you will see in more detail, apply to all types of enterprises. The starting point were the UNCTAD core indicators, but then what was added were the blind spots and context. Contextualization to place the indicators within the planetary boundaries when it comes to environmental indicators, and to secure the minimum sustainability in the social sphere, which is, if you think of the donut, Kate Raworth's donut, it is basically addressing both the shortfalls in the social area and the overshoot of the planetary boundaries. They're informed by the purpose of the social solidarity economy to transform economic relations. In particular, that's visible in indicators that speak to democratic governance, collective action, equity, and human dignity. The structure is economic, environmental, social, and institutional indicators in the tier 1. And those are the UNCTAD startup, the starting point indicators that we start from, but then adding context, trends, or transformative power to those 4 sets of indicators is in the tier 2. The social solidarity economy is in particular relevant in the tier 2, where we see some transformation as indicated in the indicators that we designed. The social area is particularly fitting to these kinds of enterprises because they often focus on them, and they are typically associations with a people-centered purpose. They mitigate isomorphism of large SSCs, as I said already, and they have stakeholder-focused sustainable practices, circular economy, we add that as well, and democracy and inclusion in both governance and management. So the issues that are addressed in the environment are supply chain emissions, the circular economy, watershed boundaries. In the social, it's about distribution of income, gender equity, labor rights, and employment inclusion and ethical sources. And in the institutional, we're making a statement that context-based accounting only makes sense if you want to capture sustainability and democratic governance, which is very much in the SSE strong point, employee participation, very much the strength of worker cooperatives, but of course others as well, and then information sharing and resilience factors. However, more work needs to be done not only on the SDPIs, but also on sustainability accounting and in general in the sustainability policy. So spreading the word, context is relevant, accounting needs to shift in that direction. Norms that we have in SDPI may need to be revisited. We've had arguments whether they're ambitious enough, much as they come from best practice. We're not always convinced that that's the most pressure towards sustainability. And then within the SSE itself, some small organizations may struggle. They may not do well on some of the indicators, but it's not because they don't want to, for example, pay a living wage. It may be that they're just not able to, given their stage in the life cycle or the inability to deliver on that indicator. But is then the real value captured? So we need to take another look and see what else can be measured in order to show the real value. And then measurement is not a panacea. We need to change policy in this direction as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, Zen, you're up.
All right. Hi, everybody. Good day. My name is Zen Lee, a research analyst under the Alternative Economies for Transformation program. And today, I would like to unveil our UNRISD SDPI online platform. So here's an introduction. So the SDPI online platform, it's an easy to use tool to access the progress of companies towards sustainability, and it's free for all users. It's meant for all economic entities, whether you're the for-profit enterprises or social and solidarity economy organizations and enterprises, with additional 6 indicators for SSEs. And it produces an automatically generated report that features trend analysis, as well as allow users to assess impacts or performance in relation to sustainability norms and threshold, as what Yu Chong has mentioned much earlier. So I just want to go through very quickly the SDPI online platform, how it works, explore the 2 indicators, how does the sustainability threshold and norms work in the platform, and what are some examples of the transformative disclosure, and some of the other updates at the end. So tier 1 is basically the core indicators from UNCTAD. They represent the minimum disclosure that companies will need to provide for the implementation of SDGs. What we have done here is we have added trends in these indicators. So when to give an example, one example in the tier 1 would be green investment. This would be an example of a minimum disclosures that company will need to provide. And what we have done in our platform is we have this indicator, and so any users who is using this platform can key in the data and can key in their disclosure on what are their total investments, as well as what green investment they have been made. And what would happen is you will get a trend analysis result of the proportion of green investment for the period of 5 years. You can see that whether your green investment in proportion to total investment has increased or has decreased. One thing I would like to stress about tier 1 is that they are incremental, right? So that means what we have seen before is that it just made incremental adjustments. The aim is to minimize negative ESG impacts or doing less harm, but they don't measure progress towards sustainability. Here's where tier 2s come in, and here's where the UNRISD innovation comes in as well. Because ESG performance do not enable meaningful assessment, where economic entity, we cannot judge whether the economic entity is really in a sustainable pathway or not. What we want to do is we want to, similar to how the net zero carbon reduction trajectory is gaining tractions, we want to also extend this to the environmental area, social and governance area, and to embed these norms and thresholds. So to give an example on this, we have various environmental thresholds, such as the greenhouse gas, water use, renewable energy, hazardous waste. And we also have numerous threshold and norms indicators within the social economics area, such as living wage, fair CEO-employee pay ratio, tax gap, gender pay gap, whether the companies have, or economic entities or SSE entities have provide caregiving support programs, as well as occupational injuries. So to illustrate how the example works in the SDPI online platform, this would be the screen that you will see in our platform. You will get the indicator's name. You will get the focus, which is that they will provide you a trend analysis at the end of the data inputs. You will get also the sustainability thresholds or norm. So what you will do in this sense is that you would provide your data. So in this case, it's hazardous waste. You would provide, what are your total hazardous waste in your operation, and how many of those are treated. And that's the key, because the norm for this indicator is that all hazardous waste should be treated entirely. And once you have inputted your result, you would get this sustainability judgment, the assessment of sustainability. And what we have also done is another innovation in this SDPI online platform is that we have put in a rate of progress, whether you have, what's your rate of progress towards the sustainability targets. So for example, in this example here, I've made example just for today. In 2018, you know, your proportion of hazardous waste is only 30%, so you're unsustainable. But in the next year, once you have improved your proportion of hazardous waste treated, and then you can be judged as, you know, maybe still far from sustainability. And then once you have improved it, the following year, you're moving towards sustainability. And then the year after, perhaps you're closer to sustainability, and perhaps at the year 2022, you have now reached sustainability because you have treated all your hazardous waste. Again, there'll be a trend analysis of what is your proportion of hazardous waste, as well as in the report, whether sustainable or not. Then there's also another thing that we've done is what is the indicator other than the indicator with a context-based indicator where there's sustainability thresholds or norm. We also have 24 indicators that consider transformative disclosures. So what is this transformative disclosure? I'll give an example. So one of the example here is responsible and ethical sourcing. So with, you know, current globalized value chain formation, you know, sometimes they mask irresponsibility and unsustainable impacts, right? Both upstream and downstream. So a transformative disclosure here would be, you know, to ensure that you have what it takes to do responsible and ethical sourcing. So if we were to be in the platform, we'll give you the definition of what responsible and ethical sourcing means. And we also tell you, you know, what kind of policy and programs that you should engage or you should disclose. And so on the right-hand side, you will see some of those policies and programs that we think that is necessary for you to disclose to be considered responsible and ethical sourcing. But again, because this indicator, as they are called transformative disclosures, there's not yet at least a sustainability norm or thresholds that is put in place. Finally, once you have completed all of the data inputs, you will get a progress report. It will go through, it will provide you with, you know, all the indicators. This is one example. They'll provide you the details data that you have put in. And then for indicators that have sustainability norms, they will tell you whether that indicator is sustainable or not. Just for the final updates on this, so the SDPI online platform is now in the beta version. You can test it out now at www.sdpi.unrisd.org. We are still currently developing two crucial indicators. And so the full SDPI website is still in development, but it's expected to be launched at least end of June. But I'll do my best. And finally, check out our newly released SDPI research and policy brief on the summary of our work at www.unrisd.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Zen. And now, David, over to you to introduce our next panel.
Yep. And so next up, we have Delilah Rothenberg, a co-founding partner and the executive director of the Pre-Distribution Initiative, joined by Victor Castro, the associate director at the Pre-Distribution Initiative. All right, take it away.
Thanks so much, David. I'm going to have Vic go first to present the task force on inequality-related financial disclosures. So that's all you, Vic.
Thanks, Delilah. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much to the ASBN team and to Michael for inviting us to present today, and thank you all for being here. My name is Vicky de Castro, and I'm Associate Director with the Pre-Distribution Initiative, or PDI for short. We're a nonprofit founded in 2019, designed to co-create improved investment structures and investment governance processes that help investors and their stakeholders better address systemic and systematic risks, including inequality, climate change, and biodiversity loss. In addition, we're a member of the Interim Secretariat of the Task Force on Inequality-Related Financial Disclosures, or TIFTI, which we helped to launch in 2020. Today, we'll talk about TIFTI and its convergence with the Task Force on Social-Related Financial Disclosures, which is another initiative that was created by the B4IG, or Business for Inclusive Growth.
Vic, do you want to share your screen?
Oh yeah, I just realized that. There we go, apologies. So after that intro of us, first I'll share a bit about the history of TIFTI. Then we will tell you a bit about the plans for the second half of the year as a converged initiative already with TSFD. So TIFTI's interim secretariat is interim because the group that formed TIFTI did not presume to be legitimate to produce the framework itself, which by the nature of the topic would require much more representation and a co-creation process. It named itself the interim secretariat to signal that the composition of the group was temporary. The TIFTI-IS would create the structures to enable a representative group formed by a wide range of stakeholders to work on a risk management and disclosure framework focused on socioeconomic inequality. The interim secretariat is formed by the Southern Center of Inequality Studies of Witwatersrand University in South Africa, the Argentinian Network for International Cooperation, which is a confederation of over 150 CSOs in Latin America, Rights Collab, an American CSO working at the intersection of business, human rights, and technology, us, the Predistribution Initiative, working at the intersection of investment structures, market structure, governance, and sustainability, and the United Nations Development Program, a global and leading organization on social issues which works closely with policymakers and regulators. UNDP is also the organization that has calculated the Human Development Index and published the Human Development Report for the last 30 years. TIFTI was conceived to be a risk measurement and management framework from the lens of the private sector's contribution to socioeconomic inequality and vice versa. To be useful, TIFTI would have to correct the fragmentation of existing social risk management disclosures as they relate to systematic and systemic risk, identify and close any gaps, and package relevant aspects of them together with guidance. It would have to be interoperable with other major frameworks made by, for example, the International Sustainability Standards Board and the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. The research-backed premises of the framework itself and disclosures made based on it in aggregate could help policymakers, regulators, and investors in measuring and managing systemic social risk. The information could support CSOs, rights holders, labor advocates, and others in driving accountability in the private sector. The relationship between all of this and academia is clear. Without research, there are no planetary boundaries, there are no social boundaries, there's no exploration of frontier topics in areas that are not commercially interesting. Research performed outside of academia is equally important as long as it is offered up as a public good. UNRISD did just that to create the SDPI. It's incredibly helpful, and we look forward to collaborating moving forward. Besides academia, we believe that so many stakeholder groups should be a part of the co-creation process. The topic of inequality cannot be fairly addressed without this. We need the CSOs, the investors, labor and corporates covering big, small, and medium enterprises. We know that each stakeholder group has inequalities inside of it, and we have to figure out how to allow them to represent themselves. The key features of TIFTI are accounting for feedback loops, so identifying both inside-out risks as well as the outside-in risks, inside-out as well as outside-in risks, accounting for the full value chain, so company and investor level reporting, which is a layer that is usually missing, accounting for activities, governance, and distributions of returns to all actors throughout the value chain. It needs to be rights-based and inclusive, centering rights holders in a co-creation process that breaks through historical power imbalances in a collaborative and constructive forum, which we hope can diffuse polarization and build bridges. Of course, it needs to be context-based, which UNRISD did beautifully with SDPI. All of the guidance targets, goals, and thresholds need to be informed by planetary boundaries, human rights, and geographic nuances. This is our history thus far of TIFTI. In 2020, TDI and Rights Collab thought that a TIFTI would be important and that it should exist. They published an article on responsible investor, which kicked off the process of creating the framework. In 2021, funding was secured for the first time from the Tipping Point Fund. In 2022, in-depth discussions with B4IG started. And in 2023, just last month actually, we announced the intention to converge efforts. This has been supported by other organizations, including WBCSD, PIC, SHIFT, the OECD, and additional labor and investor organizations. These are the communities of each of the initiatives. It's a snapshot, it's not exhaustive, but it already shows how they are complementary to each other, increasing the quantity and diversity of stakeholders, and so contributing to building representation. It's important to have users of the framework and also those affected by what it's going to measure. We're striving to create the balance, and we hope that you will join too. We're going to hold a consultation process in the second half of the year. And these are some of the topics that we expect to be discussed. Materiality, so single impact, systemic and/or systematic materiality, and what each stakeholder group thinks of each of those. Co-creation and inclusivity, so who to engage with, when, how, and also who would like to participate in the task force itself. Noting that right now, there's a lot of operational activities going on, as well as the conceptual work. What the value out of the task force should be, what the name should be, and also if a risk management framework or a disclosure framework is more needed right now. So these are the next steps, the immediate next steps. Stakeholder engagement and mapping is a continuous and iterative process. It's going to go on for the indefinite future. We are working very hard to ensure balanced representation in the interim secretariat or working group. The consultation is expected to start very soon on the scope and governance structures. Then in the end of the year, we'll be building the governance structure and launching the task force. And then finally, a task force can start working on the framework itself. So thank you very much. It's lovely to be on this panel with all of you. For more information, please contact me. I'm TIFD coordinator as well as PDI associate director, or you can reach out directly to our institutional email at info@thetifd.org. Now I'll pass it on to our executive director, Delilah Rothenberg, who will talk to you about a specific PDI project that would have a lot to add to any social inequality related disclosure framework.
Thanks so much, Vic. And hopefully we'll have some time for questions if anybody has any about TIFD. So I'm going to share my screen and let's see here. So can everybody?
Yes.
See my presentation? It looks like that works now. So
Looks
is
good.
Vic? Oh, great. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Michael and David and ASBN and the Own the Metrics campaign for hosting us here today, among so many other wonderful people who are doing incredible work. As Vic said, we're really inspired by the SDPI indicators and all the work that UNRISD has done. And we've been huge fans of the ASBN community for a long time as well. So for those of you who aren't familiar with our work, Vic may have mentioned this in her comments. I'm sorry if I'm repeating this, but the Pre-Distribution Initiative is a nonprofit. We were founded in 2019, and we're designed to co-create improved investment structures and investment governance practices for investors with their stakeholders that better address systemic and systematic risks, including inequality, climate change, and biodiversity loss. One of the reasons why we were founded is because we realize that there is a lot of focus in the ESG and mainstream impact investing community on holding portfolio companies accountable and focusing on portfolio company products and services or operations, and not so much in terms of measuring and managing what's going on with the structure of the financial system itself, what investors are doing. And so that's a huge focus of ours. So for this Own the Metrics campaign discussion, we're going to be talking about assessing the investor dimension. This is very early stages. We're in the process of co-creating metrics and disclosures to assess this dimension. We're not quite at the point of being able to determine what the right thresholds for different activities are, but we hope to do that in collaboration with you and other stakeholders in the ecosystem as folks start to become more aware of this topic. So just as some standard setting, some context setting and standard setting. ESG and impact investing frameworks focus primarily on the portfolio company level, as I just mentioned. And so we have a few different frameworks here. I guess I could have included IRIS Plus on this slide as well, but you see GRI, the IFRS sustainability work, the ISSB, TCFD, TNFD, the IFC performance standards on environmental and social sustainability, GRES. All of these frameworks are focused on portfolio companies. They help investors assess portfolio company products and services and operations. But as we say at the pre-distribution initiative, we need to look at the full equation. So it's not just portfolio companies that have impacts, and I don't know if you can see my cursor and follow along with me on this slide, and hopefully you can, but it's also investors who have impacts. And together, that holistically will allow us to assess whether we're conducting responsible investment. Investors, like asset owners and allocators, sit at the top of the capital markets value chain, and they set the incentives for everybody else downstream, for the asset managers, for the companies. And so you can't really solve problems holistically if you don't look at the roots of the issues. And so we have this sort of diagram on this slide. I'm not sure if it actually works well, but put another way, addressing the leaves and branches of a tree without really looking at the roots leaves you sort of playing a game of whack-a-mole, like all these different problems come up and you're not actually addressing the root of the problem. So we have a project that we started with the Impact Management Project. Some of you might be familiar with that organization. They've sunsetted now and their framework sits in the Impact Management platform. But the Impact Management Project was one of the only frameworks when we first started that had a dimension that looked at what investors were doing to contribute to impacts. And because the Impact Management Project was particularly focused on impact investing, where folks are looking to make a positive impact, that dimension, investor contribution, as they called it, really focused on what investors were doing to support their portfolio companies and stakeholders in a positive way. Are the investors providing catalytic capital? Are they providing technical assistance to the portfolio companies to make a deeper impact? So we came along, and actually one of our co-founders of the pre-distribution initiative is Amanda Feldman, who is also on the founding team of the Impact Management Project. And we were able to have a great conversation with the Impact Management Project about thinking about expanding the investor contribution dimension of their framework to include negative investor contribution. So our investors, putting incentives on the company that are extracting so much return, financial return, that the company doesn't have the resources to offer quality jobs or quality and affordable goods and services or invest in long-term sustainability, for instance. So we pursued this project. It was in 2021, and we published a paper that's actually available on our current project's website. Vic, maybe you can put that link to the consultation website in the chat. Thanks. So you can find the paper there, and we did this preliminary assessment of negative investor contribution across asset classes. And then once the Impact Management Project sunsetted, we actually partnered with an organization that came out of the Impact Management Project, Impact Frontiers, on continuing the work to better understand investor contribution, both positive and negative. And we were fortunate enough to have funding from Omidyar Network to focus specifically on private equity, private debt, and venture capital asset classes. This diagram that you see on this slide has come out of this project. It's something that we're exploring, and I can walk you through it really quickly. Again, the middle sort of shows what we referred to at the pre-distribution initiative as the capital markets value chain, including stakeholders at the end. And you have asset owners and allocators like pension funds, insurance companies, and sovereign wealth funds, or foundations and endowments at the top, or endowments really. They set the incentives for asset managers, and then asset owners and allocators and asset managers set incentives for enterprises, the portfolio companies. And then that can result in impacts, positive or negative, on end stakeholders in the environment and social and economic systems. Additionally, investors can have, if you look at the top arrows on this diagram, impacts on end stakeholders in the environment and social and economic systems directly. So if you think about how an investor structures their fund for tax, maybe they're structuring it to avoid taxes, or maybe fund manager compensation is so high that it's exacerbating inequality. And so that can have direct impacts on end stakeholders in the environment and social and economic systems. And then similarly, this project is applicable not just to impact investors, but to investors who recognize systemic and systematic risks. And so these arrows at the bottom of this diagram show how the negative impacts or positive impacts, really, you can have positive externalities too, on end stakeholders in the environment and social and economic systems proceed through feedback loops to affect enterprises, asset managers, and asset owners and allocators. And if they're negative impacts, negative externalities, then they can affect certainly asset owners and allocators and asset managers' diversified financial returns. So this can be applicable to investors who are concerned about the financial performance of their portfolios as well. And some of you might be familiar with this concept of universal ownership or system level investing or systemic stewardship, which really I don't think we have time to go into, but those theories really articulate that, dynamic. Michael, I see you coming on camera. So are we running short on time?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
Okay.
It's totally interesting, but you have to get to the last panel.
All right. These are some examples of the issues that we're looking at. And the idea is to align the investment and the stewardship teams. And so we invite you to join us in this consultation period. It's actually ending in a few days, but if you go to the link that I think Vic probably put in the chat, you'll learn more about the project there. And thank you so much.
Super, thanks to Lila and Vic. We're so grateful to have you as part of the team. It's now my great honor to introduce Dennis Price from Impact Alpha and Alan White from the TELUS Institute. And I had a long introduction prepared, as they both deserve, but in the interest of time, I'm going to go directly to Dennis.
Thank you, Michael, and I will try to be quick here. Just wanted to and appreciate you inviting us on. Impact Alpha is a media publication that covers impact investing and sustainable finance globally across asset classes. So I just want to share, I think, a few reactions from a media standpoint, or someone on the journalism beat of sustainable finance, impact investing, global development, but also a bit from my perch here in the U.S. Because I think it's particularly this work is particularly interesting for U.S. practitioners. One, just from a media standpoint, perhaps counterintuitively, one thing we've learned is that impact measurement, impact management is a hugely popular topic amongst financial and business professionals, and I think increasingly so. It's what sets folks apart in the economy. And so the more you can share with folks like us and talk about your impact and what your networks are doing, the better. And we think it's vastly undercovered, and it's why we sort of built a media company around covering it. Specifically on the indicators, it's really encouraging to see businesses sort of take the lead on this in owning the metrics. One, and I think in holding themselves accountable, but also recognizing the urgency and the opportunity in addressing the SDGs, and then broadening the focus to these entities, including cooperatives and social enterprises, who, frankly, we see as delivering major sustainable outcomes and increasingly have access to capital, and folks are working to get them broader access. And so measurement will become increasingly important there. Also encouraging to see the effort to acknowledge and center workers in business metrics. I think folks on this call know that well and why you want to do that, but there's a huge opportunity to bring other businesses along. And I would say particularly in the US, where I think we're way behind Europe and other parts of the world on this. But in the US, workers and measures of workers' rights and power and ownership, I think is increasingly on the agenda of politicians and investors. Again, will lead to greater demand for better measurement. Last week, we saw a policy that's introduced, a bipartisan policy that's going to make employee-owned companies help them raise money easier by supporting funds that help finance employee-owned conversions. It was bipartisan. They framed it as pro-economic. They framed it as pro-national security. We're seeing more and more funds focus on workers and worker ownership, including like legacy private equity firms like KKR, asset owners like the Ford Foundation, and pension funds like some other folks have shared, increasingly focused on workers. So to see more robust measurement around that is exciting. Also, hats off to this group. I think this was expressed earlier as well, but to see business leaders stake out a position that goes beyond ESG, as this campaign in the US has ramped up. And frankly, like a number of Republican politicians are gearing up to literally center anti-ESG policy in their campaigns. One I think strategy that folks have been encouraging to push back on all that is to actually deliver on the promise of ESG and impact. And so what you've done here, I think, helps do that and help make it real and not a greenwashing, impact washing, SDG washing activity. So delivering on impact as a way to sort of push back on all of that. And just the last few points, just reading through some of the frameworks, like this shift from outside in terms of like risks to a company to inside out, like phenomenal. It's sort of how we sort of distinguish internally ESG and impact. But also just seems like has a broader appeal to both the investment community as well as like society and citizens. People actually care what the impact the company is having in their community. So that framing seems right. Some of the specific metrics we love to see in there, the taxes, are they paying taxes, local procurement, disaggregation of benefits. I saw by gender. Seems like there could also be something around race and ethnicity maybe in there, but I didn't see it. Again, businesses tracking these things, hugely helpful. The contextual stuff, still wrapping my head around that, but seems like a massive improvement reporting for a journalist, but I think also investors and others. So that sounds fantastic. Lastly, I would just say, please share more of the stories of your networks, of your businesses, if you're an investment firm, with us, with other media. We'd love to explore partnership with ASBN, SEE, the UN to sort of lift all this up. And I'm going to drop a link in here to our beat. Impact management is a beat for us at Impact Alpha. We have hundreds of stories, and again, they're popular, and it's how to. It's like how do we do all this better? So thank you for your contribution there, and thanks for having me.
Dennis, thank you so much. And also thanks to you and Amy for this incredible article that went out on Tuesday. And Alan, this is the best for last. So turning it over to you.
And very kind, Michael. You saved the oldest for last. I don't know if it's the best for last. I'm listening to these incredible presentations and thinking, my God, how this movement has evolved since I first got interested in this issue 40 years ago. I'm counting. So to see the formation of all these initiatives and the energy and the creativity behind it, I can tell you is nourishment beyond nourishment for me. It's like a vision fulfilled. We have for so long been stuck in the reporting world, in the data world, in the metrics world, with a very narrow, almost myopic focus on numerators. That is, pounds of this and hours of that. And have, as many on this screen have said, it's time to denominate all this data, not just numerate it, but denominate it, contextualize it. And as we were speaking, I pulled this off my shelf, 2002, GRI, the word context. I put in this document, not exactly understanding it, but intuitively thinking, this is the key, the context of all the data that's beginning to pour out of companies and enterprises, social and otherwise, for-profit, not-for-profit, but lack of contextualization was an unfinished task then, and as we can listen to the progress, amazing progress here in the last few years, is now become a major focus of attention, and it's none too soon. This all began, this whole movement began, as you probably know or may not know, in the 80s with some horrific environmental incidences of oil spills in the Alaska waterways, to the Bhopal tragedy in India, triggering a flood of concern about what is business doing to us and for us and with us. That led to the emergence of series in the US and Europe, other initiatives, the birth of metrics. I'll say the birth of metrics without being too exclusive, formation of GRI in 1997, the mention of the word context a few years later, and then in the last decade, particularly, the explosion of ESG interests, positive and negative. It has become many of you have said, a hot button issue in the media, in policy circles, in regulatory circles. And that's the good news. Of course, the bad news is that this is a suppression of the ESG and ESG initiatives is now emergent among those who are of a reactionary mode. So we stand at this moment in time with a keen sense of urgency, a keen sense of opportunity demonstrated by all the presenters in this event, and also a keen sense of confusion. The numbers of initiatives just in the last 15 minutes, I can tell you, adds to my warehouse of acronyms that I now have to go back and add to my files. Sure, I'm tracking at least half of all the good work that's going on. So I would raise the flag among all those who have spoken today. Do not be aware of the confusion that can emerge with all the best intentions and all the incredible intelligence that goes into these initiatives. Be aware of the risk of confusion and leading to not just paralysis, but even alienation. It's just too much. These guys don't know what they're doing. They don't talk to each other. There's too much traffic at the intersection, and I'm withdrawing because I can't deal with it all. So please, all those hard at work, moving this movement forward at this critical moment, moving from incrementalism to transformational views and perspectives and paradigms, be sure that you are speaking clearly to those who are not part of your group, to those in the larger world whose support will be essential to success. So I say all this and using the term I think Michael quoted at some point. I think we're at a Brundtland moment, as in Brundtland Report, 1987, that put sustainability on the table once and for all, and all that's followed, whether it's reporting, measurement, and all this, was a stake in the ground. 1987, the Brundtland Report, that set the table, if you will. Now we're at the third, fourth, and fifth course of our meal, setting it with all the initiatives that we've heard about here and digging into what I call moving from what I call light touch sustainability to deep sustainability, and all the incredible work that UNRISD and all the others who have spoken here, I can tell you is, for me, a dream come true. And I urge all of you, stay the course, stay focused, stay clear of what the non-involved public is hearing about your work, so that they can, in their own small ways, the food they purchase, the food they eat, the companies they invest in, will make the right decisions. So speak clearly, not just to each other, but to the external world. Hopefully, and I'll end with this, we can't afford 30 more years waiting for breakthrough practices in reporting and measurement. It's simply, we don't have that time. We don't have that luxury. So we have to do what we want to do, not in 30 years, as we started back in the 1990s, but in 3 years and 5 years and no more than that. accelerate at the same time, keeping clearly focused on clarity and inclusiveness. And hopefully we'll look back at this event that Michael and others organized, and the Business Council, ASBC, and other participants. Hopefully we'll look at this as one moment in time where so much was put on the table, and so with such lucidness and such passion, that we'll see the repercussions playing out quickly, forcefully, and effectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. I'll turn it now over to Il-Chung and David for closing remarks. Il-Chung first. You're on mute.
Thank you so much. Especially Alan, I still remember the dinner we had together in 2018, just before the launch of this project. And I still remember your encouragement over the dinner table. And I'd like to have it again someday. Thank you very much. And I always believe that, you know, a small group of like-minded people can change the world. And I think today I saw that small group of like-minded people in this webinar. And I'm very sure that we will see the world changed in our direction. So thank you very much for your participation and presentation. And we will keep continuing our journey to the kind of changing world, or route to change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Il-Chung. David.
Thank you all for joining today's webinar, and thank you to this incredibly globally talented, inspiring team of folks that that really represent the rising global social economy movement and how we can reimagine and rebuild our economies. The Own the Metrics campaign is about taking this work forward, and we really believe this is no longer a dream, but a practical reality, benchmarked by the incredible metrics that you've seen through the Sustainable Development Performance Indicators and the others. And, you know, this is our pathway forward towards building a more just, sustainable economy, and the work will continue. We remain committed to it, and we thank Social Economy Europe and the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, you know, for their incredible partnership. So thank you all. Onward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.